The galaxy was holding its breath. Across 1,000 star systems, fleets floated in silence, weapons armed, engines humming with restrained fury. Every screen, every transmission, every leader was waiting for a single signal, the spark that would ignite the greatest war in known history. It wasn't supposed to come to this. The treaties, the councils, the promises of unity, all had crumbled under suspicion and fear. And in that fragile, terrible quiet, when destruction felt only a heartbeat away, it wasn't a general, an admiral, or a politician who changed everything. It was a single human, standing alone at the edge of the void. No one expected humanity to matter this much. Among the elder races, humans were newcomers, a species still finding their place among civilizations older than their sun. They were seen as reckless, emotional, unpredictable. And yet, it was precisely that unpredictability that had drawn the galaxy's attention and, eventually, its fear. Humans had a strange way of surviving what should have destroyed them, of reaching out when others turned away. They made friends where no friendship should have been possible, and enemies who could never quite understand why they hadn't been wiped out already. Now, that very nature, human stubbornness, compassion, and defiance, was about to be tested in a way no one could have imagined. It began on the border world of Avelis Prime, where two great powers had gathered their fleets. The Thalra Dominion and the Vadran Alliance had accused each other of sabotaging a peace station orbiting the system's dying sun. The wreckage still burned, and every side blamed the other. Words had failed. Diplomacy was dead. The only thing left was vengeance. Hidden among the chaos, a small human delegation was trapped. Observers from a world that had no real power in this war. They had come to witness peace talks. Instead, they found themselves caught between armadas, ready to unleash extinction. Every message they sent to higher command went unanswered. Every escape route was blocked. And then, in the middle of the countdown to annihilation, one of them, quiet, unarmed, and completely alone, did something no one could have predicted. They didn't fire a weapon or issue a threat. They didn't beg or plead. They simply acted, a small human act that no machine, no council, no alien strategist could have calculated. Something born from instinct, from empathy, from that strange human mix of fear and courage. Something that made the fleets hesitate. In that instant, across light years, sensors flickered. Commanders froze. Even the most battle-hardened veterans found themselves unable to give the order. Something shifted, just slightly, but enough to stop the galaxy from tearing itself apart. For a moment, time held still. No one understood what had happened. Not the admirals, not the diplomats, not even the human who had done it. All they knew was that the galaxy had been one breath away from ending, and somehow, impossibly, that breath had been held. But peace bought in a moment of instinct is fragile, and as the silence stretched on, whispers began to spread. Who was this human? What had they done? And why did it feel as if the universe itself was watching? Because sometimes it takes only one act, one human act, to change everything. And this was just the beginning. No one could explain it at first. The tactical feeds showed no interference. The ships hadn't malfunctioned. There was no hidden signal, no secret weapon. Yet, for reasons no one could describe, both sides of the standoff, Dominion and Alliance alike, had stopped their countdowns. Their weapons cooled. The fire control systems blinked to stand by. Every captain stared at their screens, waiting for someone else to move first. The moment stretched, long enough for confusion to replace anger. And in the middle of it all, one human stood outside the safety of any fleet, facing a sky filled with death. Her name didn't matter then. She wasn't a soldier or a diplomat. She was a technician, part of the human delegation assigned to keep the peace station systems running during negotiations. When everything fell apart, she refused to evacuate, even when her team begged her to. She said someone had to stay behind to keep the signal beacon alive, to prove there was still a line open between the warring sides. Nobody knew that simple choice, to keep a channel active, would ripple through the stars. From orbit, her beacon was just a faint pulse, a human-made heartbeat in a sea of static. But that heartbeat carried something else, an old transmission protocol, long forgotten, one that predated the great alliances and wars. It wasn't a weapon or a threat, it was a song, a recording buried deep in human archives, broadcast by accident when she tried to stabilize the beacon's core. The signal was soft, almost broken, just a voice humming through static, carrying emotion that didn't need translation. Somehow, the fleets heard it. Across command decks and sensor arrays, the sound slipped through the noise, cutting across alien frequencies and encrypted networks. It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the feeling, the strange, fragile reminder of life before conflict. For a second, even the most war-hardened captains hesitated, reminded that peace had once existed, that life could be something other than orders and retaliation. But not everyone saw it that way. Within moments, the signal was flagged as interference. Dominion Command suspected a psychological weapon. The Vadran Alliance accused humanity of manipulating emotions through hidden tech. The peace that had lasted only seconds began to fracture again, suspicion rising like smoke. And yet, something still held the fleets in place, as if they were waiting, not for orders but for understanding. Back on the ruined station, the human technician sat among the wreckage, unaware that her small action had reached every major fleet across the galaxy. Her communications panel flickered, showing incomplete transmissions from both sides. Some hailed her in confusion, asking what she'd done. Others demanded she shut down immediately. But the beacon's power core was failing, and she couldn't stop it even if she wanted to. All she could do was watch the lights dim one by one, wondering if she had made things worse or better. Meanwhile, in the hidden halls of the Galactic Council, the news was spreading faster than light. One human had halted an interstellar war, if only for a breath, and no one could explain why. Analysts argued over data. Commanders whispered theories. Some called it luck. Others called it manipulation. A few, quietly, called it hope. The human act that saved billions wasn't part of any strategy. It wasn't planned, approved, or even understood. And yet the aftershocks were already shifting alliances, forcing enemies to talk and leaders to question everything they believed about humanity. But as the fleets continued their silent standoff, new signals began to appear, unidentified, distant, and growing stronger. Something else had heard the beacon too. Something older than the Dominion or the Alliance, and far beyond the stars in the darkness where no fleet dared to go, a new voice began to answer. In the hours that followed, the galaxy teetered on the edge once again. The fleets remained locked in their uneasy standoff, drifting in the cold silence of Avalus Prime's orbit. Every commander waited for someone else to make the first move, unwilling to be the one responsible for reigniting the war. Yet no one dared to stand down either. The balance was fragile, too fragile, and everyone knew it couldn't last. Inside the Dominion flagship, the High Admiral paced the bridge, his scaled hands clenched behind his back. The mysterious signal from the human beacon replayed again and again across their displays. "It's manipulation," he hissed, his voice low but sharp. "A psychological attack designed to disrupt tactical synchronization." Around him, the crew exchanged uneasy glances. They had heard the song too, and though they didn't understand the language, it had stirred something in them, something they didn't want to admit. Across the void, in the Vadran flagship, another argument raged. Their fleet commander stared at the same data and saw something different. "No weapon," she said softly. "No code, no command structure. It's emotion. Raw, almost pure." Her officers hesitated to agree, afraid of sounding weak. The Alliance prided itself on logic, on order, but there was something in that human transmission that defied logic entirely. Meanwhile, on the dying peace station, the human technician struggled to keep the beacon alive. The power core's readings flickered in the red, and she could feel the low hum of instability through the floor. Supplies were gone. The communication array barely worked. Yet, against all odds, the signal was still transmitting. She didn't even know if anyone was listening anymore. The last message she'd received was half garbled, someone warning her that new signals were coming from deep space. She wasn't sure what that meant, but the tone in their voice had carried fear. Out beyond the fleets, in the dark regions where no star's light reached, something was indeed moving. Long-range sensors across multiple systems picked up faint disturbances, echoes of energy older than recorded history. Some believed it was a natural anomaly caused by the beacon's transmission. Others whispered that it was an awakening. The Council scientists had no answers. The mystery only deepened. The conflict was no longer just between the Dominion and the Alliance. Now, a new question divided every species. What was humanity really capable of? Some believed this was proof that humans had powers beyond understanding, an emotional resonance that could affect the minds of others. Others argued it was coincidence, nothing more than chance wrapped in myth. But the timing was too perfect, too impossible to ignore. Rumors began to spread. On colony worlds and trade hubs, people spoke in hushed voices about the human signal. Some claimed to have heard it themselves, even outside the Avalis system. Merchants said their navigation systems briefly hummed with the same haunting melody. A few even claimed that the signal carried visions, flashes of memory or emotion that weren't their own. Fear and wonder spread together, impossible to separate. Back on the wrecked station, the technician leaned against the shattered console, watching the faint pulse of the beacon fade in and out. Every flash felt slower, weaker. Her reflection in the cracked glass looked tired, but her eyes still held that same determination that had made her stay behind in the first place. She didn't know why she'd done it, why she couldn't just leave like the others. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was guilt, maybe both. And while she fought to keep the light alive, far away, the Galactic Council met in secret. Some demanded the human be detained, studied, silenced. Others insisted she be protected at all costs. Yet none of them realized that the real danger wasn't her. It was what her signal had awakened. Because something in the deep was still listening, and it was starting to answer louder. The tension in the galaxy had become unbearable. Across the star systems, fleets hovered on the brink, engines ready to roar, weapons primed for annihilation. Every commander knew a single misstep could spark a war that would consume entire sectors. And yet, no one moved. The human signal, the strange, haunting melody that had stopped the first strike, continued to pulse from the peace station, weak but steady, threading through the networks of Dominion and Alliance alike. It was impossible to ignore and impossible to fully understand. On the Dominion flagship, the High Admiral slammed his clawed fist against the console. "How is this possible?" he growled, staring at the flickering readouts. His fleet was disciplined, predictable, lethal, but they hesitated now, unsure why. "It's affecting the crews," he admitted reluctantly, though no one else dared voice it. Sensors showed their pilots pausing, communications officers hesitating mid-order. Every calculated plan was faltering under the weight of something that felt almost alive. Meanwhile, the Alliance commander was struggling with her own doubts. She had spent decades studying strategy, logic, and precision, but here, at the edge of space, all of that seemed meaningless. "They're human," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. "One human, and they've stopped us all." Her officers exchanged worried glances, sensing that this wasn't just a psychological anomaly. It was something far larger, something that neither side could control. On the peace station, the technician's hands moved automatically over the flickering console, trying to stabilize the beacon. Power was running dangerously low, and the transmission was becoming erratic. She had no idea what was truly happening out in the fleets, but she could feel the weight of it. Every second counted. She glanced at the sensors, noticing new signals approaching from the far reaches of the void, far beyond anything recorded in galactic history. They weren't ships, not in any conventional sense. They were shadows moving through space, enormous and deliberate, reacting to the human signal. Whispers had begun to spread among fleet crews. Some spoke of awe, others of fear. The human at the station had become a symbol, someone who might hold the key to survival, or the cause of ultimate destruction. Fleet commanders tried to maintain order, but the uncertainty gnawed at them. Every calculation, every prediction now had an unknown variable, the human act, and the forces it had awakened. As the distant anomalies drew closer, tension exploded on every bridge. Pilots gripped controls with shaking hands, weapon systems arced with energy, ready to fire, but no one dared press the trigger. Across millions of kilometers, the Dominion and Alliance fleets were locked in mirrored fear, waiting for the first shot that might never come, or the first unknown strike that could arrive at any moment. The technician on the station realized the beacon could not hold much longer. Sparks flew from the console as she tried to reroute power. Each flicker of the lights felt like a countdown, every failing system a warning. And then, from the darkness beyond the fleets, the approaching entities began to take shape. Massive, impossible structures moving with purpose, their energy signatures pulsing in response to the human transmission. They were not attacking yet, but their presence alone was enough to freeze the galaxy in place. For the first time, both fleets felt something deeper than fear. They felt small, fragile, and uncertain, as if the universe itself had shifted, and the rules they had relied on no longer applied. Every species, every commander, every observer knew that the coming moments would decide not just the fate of Avelis Prime, or the Dominion, or the Alliance, but the future of the entire galaxy. And somewhere on the station, the human technician breathed deeply, unaware that her simple act of keeping a signal alive had become the focal point of an interstellar standoff, drawing the attention of forces older and stranger than anyone had imagined. The galaxy was seconds from chaos, the unknown closing in, and the choices of one human might be the only thing standing between survival and complete annihilation. Just when it seemed the galaxy had frozen in tense silence, another anomaly rippled across the sensor networks. It started as a faint blip, barely registering on the Dominion and Alliance readouts, but within moments it grew into something undeniable, a secondary transmission layered beneath the human signal. The melody that had captivated fleets before was now accompanied by strange pulses, coded in a pattern no analyst could decipher. It wasn't coming from the station. It wasn't coming from the fleets. It was coming from deeper in space, from the very darkness the ancient structures had been approaching. The technicians on the Dominion flagship froze. "Unknown energy source," one muttered, eyes wide. The readings didn't match any known technology, not even the Vadran archives. "It's responding to the human signal," the High Admiral realized, his voice tight with fear. "But it's altering it." Across the Alliance flagship, the commander stared at her screens, trying to make sense of the data. It was as if the signal had a mind of its own, shaping the fleet's perception, bending reality just enough to keep every species on edge. Back on the station, the human technician had no idea her act had triggered something even more dangerous. The faint hum under her beacon had become a rhythm she could feel in her bones. Power fluctuations rocked the station, sending sparks flying across consoles. She tried to stabilize the core, but the systems were failing faster than she could repair them. Every second the beacon continued to transmit, the secondary signal grew stronger. Something in the void was awakening, and it wasn't waiting politely for permission. Meanwhile, across the fleets, tensions escalated. A Dominion strike group began moving without orders, drawn by the mysterious pattern in the readings. The Alliance pilots followed instinct, feeling compelled to shadow them. Both fleets edged dangerously close to breaking the standoff, their discipline eroding under the influence of the unknown force. Every officer knew the human signal had stopped them once, but now it was twisting, unpredictable, something that no protocol could contain. Rumors began circulating among civilian colonies in the outer rim. Traders and transport crews reported strange visual distortions in the void, shimmering shapes that seemed to watch them as they traveled. Messages between ships carried odd interference, garbled fragments of voices that sounded human yet spoke of distant, impossible knowledge. Fear and fascination spread in equal measure. Humanity, once a minor presence in the galaxy, had become the epicenter of something far larger, and no one could predict what it wanted. The station shuddered violently as a power conduit blew, sending the human technician sprawling. Sparks rained from the ceiling, and her console blinked dangerously. Through the trembling viewports, she could see the faint outlines of the approaching entities reacting to the signal. They weren't attacking, not yet, but their attention had shifted entirely to her. Every instinct screamed that she was the focal point of whatever was happening. And then, the new pulse changed again. Sharper, faster, almost like a heartbeat racing. It was no longer just a signal, it was communication. Something in the void was trying to speak, responding to the human act that had started this chain reaction. Every fleet paused, every sensor strained, but no one could interpret it. The galaxy had reached a new tipping point. War still threatened to erupt, but now a far greater unknown loomed, one that could override every command, every alliance, every calculation. In that moment, it became clear to everyone, humanity wasn't just influencing the galaxy. Humanity had unknowingly called something ancient, intelligent, and powerful into motion. And as the technician struggled to keep the beacon alive, the realization settled over her and every fleet alike. The very act that had stopped the First War might now be the spark that unleashed something far beyond their understanding. The stakes had just escalated, and no one could see the edge of what was coming next. The void around Avelis Prime erupted in a brilliant pulse of energy, a wave of light that radiated outward from the peace station like a heartbeat of the galaxy itself. Fleets across both the Dominion and the Alliance shivered under the pressure, weapon systems temporarily overloaded, engines flickering in response to the unseen force. The secondary signal, the one that had twisted and bent perception, now resolved into something almost tangible. It wasn't a threat, it was a choice, a bridge between species, a language beyond words. And the human at the heart of it understood instinctively what she had to do. She leaned over the failing console, hands moving with precision she hadn't known she possessed. Each adjustment of the beacon's core synchronized with the pulsing entity in the darkness. Across the fleets, the unknown structures responded. Massive shapes shimmered into clarity, enormous and awe-inspiring, their energy no longer chaotic but aligned with the human signal. A low hum filled the void, vibrating through every hull, every system, and even the minds of those watching. The galaxy held its breath. The fleets began to see each other differently, not as enemies, but as witnesses. The Dominion High Admiral lowered his targeting controls, hands shaking. The Alliance commander mirrored him, realizing the same truth. Every calculation of war, every strategy, every past grievance seemed trivial compared to the presence now hovering in space, something that dwarfed fleets, systems, and even their fears. The human had done what no council, no treaty, no weapon could. She had forced the galaxy to confront something bigger than itself, and in doing so, to stop fighting. On the station, the technician felt the final surge through the beacon. The power core flared one last time, a brilliant light that seemed to fuse the human signal with the approaching entities. The pulse resonated throughout the galaxy, reaching even the most distant systems. Fleets that had been on the brink of annihilation now drifted in awe, their weapons lowered, communications silent in disbelief. The first true act of peace in decades had been achieved, not through diplomacy, not through strategy, but through one human's courage and instinct. Just as relief began to settle across the galaxy, a new ripple appeared. The structures in the void, those vast ancient entities, did not depart. Instead, they left behind small fragments of themselves, tiny floating nodes that pulsed with the same rhythm as the human signal. They hovered near fleets, near stations, near every planet touched by the beacon. It was clear these were not gifts, not tools for humans, dominion, or alliance. They were markers, signaling that the entities were leaving something behind, a lingering presence with intelligence and purpose of its own. The human technician stared at the remnants, exhausted but alert. "They're not gone," she whispered, realizing the galaxy had been spared, for now. Something had been awakened, something that would continue to influence every species, every conflict, and every choice from this moment onward. The war had been averted, but the universe had shifted, and then, as the fleets cautiously powered up and began to withdraw from the standoff, the final twist revealed itself. The human signal, the act that had saved billions, had changed something in her too. Her heartbeat now synced subtly with the pulse of the nodes in space, a connection that no scientist could explain. Humanity had been given a gift, or a burden, that tied them forever to the entities beyond the stars. The galaxy had survived, but a new, unpredictable chapter had begun, and the future depended entirely on one species learning to understand the very force they had awakened. The fleets drifted silently, the universe forever changed, and the human technician stood alone, the smallest being at the center of a cosmic story that was far from over. The fleets slowly began to pull back, engines humming quietly as if the universe itself had exhaled. The Dominion and Alliance commanders exchanged hesitant communications, not orders, but words of understanding. There was no formal treaty, no signing of agreements. But in the silence between them, something profound had shifted. The standoff that had threatened billions was over, and for the first time, the galaxy glimpsed the possibility of coexistence. On the station, the human technician slumped against the console, exhausted but alive. The beacon, now stabilized, pulsed faintly in sync with the floating nodes left behind by the ancient entities. She realized that her simple act of keeping the signal alive had done more than stop a war. It had changed the way the galaxy perceived humanity. Species that had once seen humans as insignificant, impulsive, and fragile now recognized them as capable of courage and influence on a scale no one had predicted. Her bravery had become a reminder that even one person could tip the balance between chaos and survival. Across the fleets, crews quietly repaired systems and tended to their wounded pride as much as their actual damage. The Dominion High Admiral, once consumed by suspicion and aggression, allowed himself a rare smile. The Alliance commander quietly noted the anomaly in her logs, knowing that history would not record this day as a battle won, but as a day when war was averted by an act of empathy and resilience. Fleets that had prepared for destruction now faced the challenge of rebuilding trust, and slowly, cautiously, they began to extend it. The nodes left behind by the entities lingered as silent reminders in space. Scientists, philosophers, and leaders from every corner of the galaxy debated their meaning. Were they observers, guides, guardians, or something else entirely? No one had the answers, but the important lesson was clear. The galaxy had been forever changed, and humanity now had a role in shaping its future. The entities had chosen not to punish or conquer, but to challenge and awaken, leaving a question that each species would wrestle with in the years to come. On the station, the technician finally allowed herself a deep breath. She had faced impossible odds, held the fate of billions in her hands, and succeeded not with weapons or strategy, but through determination and humanity. The realization settled over her. Her act had sparked hope, reminded the galaxy of empathy, and proved that even a single individual could matter more than entire fleets of warships. For the first time in decades, she felt the weight of peace rather than the pressure of conflict. And yet, there was a quiet acknowledgement that the story was not truly over. The nodes pulsed softly in the distance, a subtle reminder that something ancient and intelligent had been awakened and would continue to influence the galaxy in ways no one could fully predict. Humanity had been given a responsibility, a connection to forces far beyond comprehension, and the future would demand wisdom, courage, and unity to navigate it. As the fleets dispersed and stars resumed their quiet twinkle, the galaxy seemed to pause and reflect. Conflict had been averted, tension had been resolved, but the lessons remained. Courage matters, empathy can change outcomes, and even one human act can ripple across the cosmos. The technician looked out into the void, a sense of calm and possibility settling over her, knowing the galaxy had survived, and that the story of humanity and the universe was only beginning. The pulse of the beacon continued, steady and unwavering, a reminder of what had been done and what was yet to come. And in that quiet, infinite space, hope glimmered.